Hi everybody, this is Derek making this video for Professor Rosenstock to show off xNormal, which is this program right here. Looks a little bit archaic, but it's really awesome and is able to um, bake out a whole bunch of maps from a high poly model onto a low poly model. You can get it for free at xnormal.net. It looks like this. Just go to the downloads page and then download the latest one for whatever operating system you have. I think it's only Windows. Um, but yeah. So, what you need for this to work is you need to have a low poly, which is what I have here. I'm going to be baking out this plank of wood. The topology for me doesn't matter right now because this is just a static mesh. It's not going to be moving. I just used the basic ZBrush decimation master, and this is what it spit out for me. Pretty low poly, so I'm happy with it. So you need to export both the high poly and the low poly out as a .obj. In Maya, you want to be sure that you have the obj export turned on in your preferences so that you can export it out. I brought it. You don't need to bring it into Maya first. I just did it so that I could set my UVs up the way I wanted. And then in ZBrush, I have this high poly model that has my color, has a little bit more definition on some of the corners, and uh, has the extra wood grain detail in the normals of the thing. So in ZBrush, all you have to do is export it out from here, and it goes where you need it to go. Another thing is that if you want to bake the diffuse into the low poly as well, you need to make sure that you unwrap it in ZBrush as a lower poly, and then bring it back up to high poly, make the texture, and then do the whole clone texture, flip vertical, and then export that out. That's going to be useful when we're baking in xNormal. So I'm going to minimize these. So once you're in xNormal, you have it opened up, you're going to see a whole bunch of these buttons on the right hand side. You're really only concerned with the top three. Um, so we're going to start out with the high definition mesh. Before we do anything, I'm going to set the default mesh scale to 10 on both high and low poly. It just helps out a lot um, with how everything bakes. So if you right click, say add mesh, it's going to ask you up at the top, please select your high definition model to add. I have mine right here. As you can see, they're .objs. And then I'm going to right click and add a base texture to bake, which is should be this one, but that comes with the OBJ as well. I exported a PSD from ZBrush. Um, you don't want to check anything else off in this box, really. In low poly, you want to do the same thing, add mesh, plank low. And now because we scaled it up, your ray distance is going to be off, so you want to set that to 4. Usually, the default is perfectly fine. I had a little bit, a few artifacts on my normal map and my ambient occlusion map last time I did this, so I just scaled it up to try and alleviate that. You never want to hit match UVs. That's if your high poly and low poly are exactly the same. Have the same UV set. Sorry, which mine do not. If you're also having trouble with artifacts, you can do the use cage. It basically sets a slightly inflated version of your low poly model over everything as like a projection model. Um, so it uses a lot more mathy stuff. In baking options, this is where we get into the nitty gritty of everything. You want to be sure that you're exporting to a file location, say output file with the 3 dots, and you're going to just say, give it a name. I'm going to say plank xNormal automatically puts an underscore and diffuse or underscore normals so and so onto the file extension. So I usually just add another one um, so that there's two and there's a bigger gap. It's just my personal thing. So size is where you select the size of the map that you're making. You can go anywhere from 16 by 16 to like 8,192. So I'm gonna stick with 1024, which is the basic size. Cell pad or edge padding. I'm gonna go to 2, not 23, 2. Because sometimes with normals it gets a little bit wonky. Um, if you have 0, I'm going to do closest edge, discard backface hits, yes. You want to make sure their anti-aliasing is set to 4, so you have like pretty smooth lines. It's not all jaggedy. Default bucket render is fine, and bucket size 32 is fine. On the left-hand side here, we have what maps that we want to bake out. So I want to bake out a normal map, a base texture map, and ambient occlusion map. So the cool thing about xNormal is that the only thing that matters for baking is the UVs of your low poly. So you can have your base texture, which I put in the high definition mesh area. You can have that set, and it's going to take all that detail and put it onto your low poly. So you don't have to worry about finagling any UVs on Maya and so forth. And then you have ambient occlusion, that's shadow, but you can do a whole bunch of other stuff. Normal maps, height maps, um, convexity map, I don't even know what that is. Cavity maps, you can even do some mesh checking maps, so to make sure that your wireframe is good. And so and so. So you can like set more options, you can do all that stuff. Doesn't really matter for me right now. Use this color, yes. Ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion, I usually just do default, but you can do a whole bunch of different things with it so that it comes out the way that you want it exactly. So once you're done with everything, you just hit generate maps, and it's going to read your files and do this all in real time. So as you can see, it's doing ambient occlusion right now, but I may have a little bit of artifact here, if you could see that from the normal. I could just basically paint that out in Photoshop if it's not something that I want. Um, Also up here, it seems to be a little bit odd. But again, it's going to export everything as a PNG, so you can uh, just make it all the exact way that you want it in Photoshop. So it's kind of hard to see, but you can sort of make out the grooves in the wood. Ambient occlusion takes a while. This is actually going fairly fast. And then this is the base texture. Okay, and it's going to say maps generated. Stop button grays out, and you can hit close. So now if I go into here, I have all of these, which are the maps that got baked out from xNormal. So I can open up, sorry, I just open them up in Photoshop. Okay, so I have them open in Photoshop. Um, I'm going to go over how I usually make my textures as well, in case anyone is wondering. So I just make my background black. And I do something, I learned this from Ralph Sutter. I overlay my normal, and then I bring over my ambient occlusion. And you set your ambient occlusion to multiply, so it adds that shadow information, and then this is where it gets a little bit weird. So in the normal adjustments, I desaturate it, and then I multiply that as well. So you get a really nice looking diffuse texture. So as you can see, there's like, it looks kind of off. So I might go back later and repaint that, but just to show you how it all looks right now. Another thing that you could do is like raise the opacity of things. Okay, so I'm going to save this out. Save as blank diffuse. Okay. I'm going to hop back into Maya. I already have a material set up, so I'm just going to say color, file. Oh, no. Diffuse. So I now have all that information there. Head back up, down, and bump mapping, file, make sure it's a tangent space normal. Load my normals up. And now you can see I have all of the high poly information baked onto my low poly. And it actually does a really good job. It's over here. So you can see that I have like a divot, but there's actually not really a divot there. Same goes for over here. So yeah, xNormal is completely free. I use it all the time. It's a pretty useful program to know. And I hope that you guys use baking to make it all your models a whole lot better. So see you in class.